Hey all, I'm Bryan Fenley, and joining me today, my guest is Hally Leadbetter, golf media maestro. A lot of you are familiar with this conversation platform where I bring on folks from different sectors of sports media, and we don't so much talk about their work lives, but more so what it's like with their personal lives, their families, and getting to know them from a human standpoint and doing it with depth and empathy and touching on those stories that really aren't out there for public consumption. Here it is, my conversation with Hally Leadbetter. And if you feel so inclined, don't forget to subscribe. Here it is. Hally Leadbetter, my guest, knows how to throw a great birthday. She had one at Topgolf, had the pleasure of being there. It was an incredible event, and her life seems to be a lot of fun. And we're going to talk about her story here on the On to Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio and a golf and tennis broadcaster. And obviously, Hally does so much in the golf space as a host, a reporter, a producer. You can see her on so many different outlets: PGA Tour Live, USGA, CBS Sports, Callaway, Nike. I'm so excited, Hally, to have a couple of minutes of your time. This is going to be really fun as we go in depth into how you think and talk about who you really are. This is going to be a blast.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, Bryan. I also have to just note you have a fantastic voice, by the
Oh,
way.
stop it.
You have a fantastic broadcast voice. So just have to get that off my chest. I was like, wow, he's got a great.
Well, you have a fantastic broadcast set of skills and talents, and we're going to dive into those here in this conversation. But I wanted to start here, Hally. Why is it so fun being you?
Wow, that is a great question. It definitely is fun, for sure. I'd say what makes it most fun is the people that I get to meet and the people that I get to work with. And you mentioned I work with Golf Digest and CBS and ESPN, and I was at Golf Digest primarily full time up until about a year ago. And they were incredibly gracious and supportive and kind of letting me go off and do my own thing while still working a lot with them. So that's been really great. But over the last year, I've just gotten to interview some really, really neat people and work with some really cool brands on some great projects that I never thought that would be possible. So I'd say that's probably why it's so fun, is that there's just so sometimes, yeah, if I'm not lying, it definitely gets a little bit overwhelming sometimes trying to manage 7, 8, 9 different projects at a time. But it is really fun. It is really fun.
But even with all that you're managing, Hally, and getting to know you're so grounded and centered. How are you able to stay that way with everything you have going on?
Therapy, honestly. No, I'm not even joking. I literally had a therapy point this morning. But no, seriously, it is really, really important because, and listen, I am by no means trying to say, woe is me, oh man, I get overwhelmed, because ultimately it is fun, right? Like, I'm not curing cancer. I'm talking about golf, for goodness sake. So so I think, one, it's keeping in a perspective, reminding myself of how lucky and fortunate I am to be able to do the things that I do. And then also, honestly, just getting in a really good routine, whether it's what time you wake up in the morning and doing some journaling and meditating, or however you sort of center yourself and stay grounded, because there are a lot of things that are out of my control, whether it's flight changes, interview cancellations, so and so can't do XYZ because of a scheduling thing, so we got to flip things around. You might not get a lot of sleep one night, and now you're sick, and now you're moving, and yeah, literally in the middle of a move right now. So that's the kind of, for me, it's just those daily sort of check-ins to sort of say, hey, I'm really lucky to be doing this. It's not life or death. And making sure that I do those little things that, keep me calm, and I make sure that I don't get all caught up and realize, like, this is just fun. We're just talking about golf here. It's not life or death.
One of those things that keeps you calm is meditation. When you approach meditation, Hally, what are you thinking about, or what are you not thinking about during that?
Yeah, so I have a very, very active mind. And I think I actually, or just bearing it all out here, I have pretty severe OCD. And I think, honestly, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because I do think it allows me to be successful and obsessive, if you will, over various projects and being a bit of a perfectionist and that kind of thing, which is can be great and can help you succeed, but it can also make you miserable. So I think for me, meditation is a way to just I'm kind of a focus on my breath kind of gal. I'm not really like a mantra person or that sort of thing. And sure, there's still have a lot of thoughts going on in my head all the time, but just kind of, I guess, finding my center and getting grounded and doing a lot of deep breathing. My brain will never shut off. Like I did a meditation course one time and these people are like, "Oh yeah, I really felt like my brain just go blank." And I'm like, "Wow, must be nice." My brain is never blank. But I think it's more so for me not thinking. It's just, what kind of thoughts am I having? Am I panicking about something? Am I stressing out over something that, again, in the grand scheme of things, is not a big deal at all? So meditation for me is less about not thinking and more about just getting my body to like a really grounded place.
How much are you thinking when you're teeing off on one and you've got people watching you?
Ooh, that's a great question. So, it's funny. I used to be really, really nervous when people would watch me play golf. And then in high school, and there was a sports psychologist. I went to IMG Sports Academy for high school, and we had a sports psychologist that worked with my group. And I was trying to, handle this thing where I was really worried about what people thought about me if they watched me play golf. And he was like, "Hally, do you get nervous when your dad watches you play?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "Oh, then you should not be nervous when anybody watches you play." And I was like, "Okay, fair. Yeah." Cause my dad's famous golf coach taught, people who have won 20 something major championships. And I think ultimately for me, it was that paired with the fact that I realized that people are going to think what they are going to think. And so golf for me, because I don't play competitively anymore, has been a really nice, I guess, break away from what I'm doing day in and day out. Sure, I'm talking about it, but I really don't get that much opportunity to play anymore. So I definitely used to take it for granted, especially, living in LA. There isn't a lot of, you got to be a member somewhere. You got to hope that someone invites you out.
Yeah.
If you want to play. So for me, my rounds now are much more few and far in between than they used to be. So I'm honestly not so much concerned with whoever's watching me, and just the fact that, hey, I'm out on a golf course. This is great.
How has your relationship with your dad evolved since you were a child and into what it is now?
Yeah. So when I was younger, first of all, he was my instructor. And then when I was in high school, and granted, I picked up golf I say picked up late. I started really taking any kind of interest in it when I was like 12 or 13, because before that, I just didn't want anything to do with it. I rode horses. My brothers played, and I was like, no, that's what my brothers do. Like, I'm going to do my own thing. And slowly but surely, I was like, oh, actually, it's kind of fun. And my parents never pushed me into it. And I'm really glad they didn't. But when I did take an interest in it, my dad, was obviously there and gave me lessons. And I think a lot of people don't know, my mom actually played on the LPGA. So that's how my parents met. My mom went to go get lessons with my dad. So my mom is a very good player. So both my parents were there and obviously helped me out. But ultimately, when I was in high school, that's when I started taking it very seriously. And when I went to IMG, and I didn't want to work with my dad. I was like, no. I had a really, really hard time, as any kid would, differentiating between coach and dad. And if I'm honest too, I'm sure that, granted, my parents were both like wonderful golf parents. You hear about these like crazy sports parents and I think for me, my parents, because they had both played at a very high level, they knew that it was very difficult. So they were wonderful, wonderful golf parents. But, my dad obviously wanted me to play well and was very supportive. And I think for him, the way that he, his thing that he could do was teach. And so he always wanted to help me, which was really great. But I needed to kind of take a step back and be like, I got to figure it out for myself. Like I have to, learn this game and be able to make a swing correction. Like I got a lesson last week. There's literally nothing different in my swing that could be going wrong. I have to go figure this out myself. So I think for me in high school was when I started working with someone else. And then I was in college was when I think I was really mature enough to start working with my dad again and be able to say, I guess to be able to separate coach versus dad. And so I could say, like, dad, no, I don't want a lesson today. And no, it doesn't mean that I don't love you. Like I genuinely need to go figure this out myself. So it was kind of like a funny thing because I needed to be able to say, I need to go do my own thing and like work on my chipping, work on my putting, go to the range by myself. And then also sometimes like, hey, let's just go play golf as like father daughter. Let's not go play golf as like coach and player. So it's definitely was like a learning process. And I think now, actually you mentioned my birthday party. My parents came out here for my birthday and we went to the range and he gave me a lesson. So now, just like playing golf is few and far in between. Getting lessons from my dad are few and far between. So before, maybe when I was kind of like shout him away and say, let me figure it out myself. Now I'm like, give me the tips. I need them.
Well, and you're a lefty, right? So
Yeah.
that's another dynamic to this. With your dad, where do you find that you coach him?
Ooh, that's a great question. Probably in social media. um, he luckily now has like a really, really great team around him. But yeah, I still will never forget the day somebody tweeted at him. And you know how you can quote tweet things? Right? If somebody tags you at Bryan, you can quote tweet and then put your comment about it above it. And then when you tweet it out, it'll show up like that. And somebody tweeted something at him and he screenshotted it and then tweeted the tweet as a photo and then commented like thank you on the top of the photo. And I was like, oh man, that was so close. Like I see what you're trying to do there, but there actually is a feature built into the app, Dad, that you can just quote tweet. You don't have to screenshot the tweet. So I'd say probably there, like tech stuff. When I was living with my parents through COVID, I was always on deck for his Zoom calls. So that's how I paid the rent for those couple of months was a tech support for my dad.
How proud of you, and how Ledbetter is with me on Bryan Fenley, of you going into an occupation that your father is, but as you said, separating yourself, creating your own path, and doing it because you want to do it, and to create that own personal brand and identity that is separate from your father. How proud are you in the way in which you've been able to take those steps to do that?
Yeah, you know what? I'd say I'm pretty proud, but what I'm like pretty proud of too is just there's still people that comment. I'm sure I'm going to get this for my whole life, whether I like it or not, that, you only got to where you are because you're David Ledbetter's daughter. And listen, I'm not an idiot. I know that it helps to have my last name. And I know that I got my foot in the door because I have my last name, or maybe someone picked up the phone or answered an email because they're like, Ledbetter, I wonder if that's related to, I wonder if that's Ledbetter's kid. So, and like, I take advantage of that. I'm not going to lie. I would be stupid not to, but I make sure that I followed up with hard work. And I think for me, when I go back to when I was playing golf, if I played well, it was like, of course you do. You're David Ledbetter's kid. And if you don't play well, it's like, what the hell's wrong with you? You're David Ledbetter's kid. So I kind of realized at a certain point, like even now when I post something or on social and somebody will comment and say, must be nice to have your job because of that XYZ. I'm like, you have literally no idea everything that has gotten to where I've gotten to now. But I still kind of pinpoint this funny media like journey that I've been on to one particular instance, which was where my dad was going to the British Open, and that was when I had started thinking, hey, maybe eventually down the road, if I don't turn pro, if I do turn pro, I could maybe get into the media side of things. And I asked my dad if I could go with him to the British Open, excuse me, the Open Championship and intern, because he was doing some radio work for the BBC. And I was like, is there any chance I could just come along as an unpaid intern and, I don't know, help with something? And he's like, well, let me ask. So he did. I went ahead and went out there with him. I got people coffee and I held an umbrella over Amanda Balionis's head. And that's how her and I met. And
Aw.
then, a couple years later, find out that she invites me to like a Christmas party because her parents live pretty near my parents in Florida. And then a friend of her helps me get a job at the PGA Tour. And it's like it's this weird web of, the way you look back at things. And I'm like, sure, yeah, was I an unpaid intern at the British Open and held an umbrella over someone's head because of my last name? Sure. But my dad didn't ask me if I wanted to go to, like I was intentional about
Yes.
where I wanted to go. And I think, it just, for some people, they always say like, take advantage of your advantages. And I think for me, like my advantage is very clearly like my last name. But I was talking to someone else the other day who has a dad that's pretty famous in, I think, basketball. And they're like, and he said something about how, he's like, oh yeah, people think that I have my job because of my dad, or they think that I know a lot about basketball because of my dad. And he's like, and you're right, I do know a lot about basketball because of my dad, because my dad was a famous basketball player, So for me, I think one, you have to like use what you got, and that some people's advantages are more out there than others. And two, like be proud of it. Like for me, I'm very proud of my dad, and I'm proud of the knowledge that I have because of him. Like I grew up in a very weird little golf bubble, and I sat on the back of the range and watched my dad teach Nick Faldo as a 6-year-old. Like that is a very weird upbringing to have, and it allows me to have a very weird particular set of knowledge and skills. So it is what it is. And I used to kind of be embarrassed and like apologize for it. Now I'm like, whatever, this is who I am, and I work really hard. And yeah, things, certain people answer phone calls because of my name, but other things I've grinded it out. And also people have not answered phones because of my name too. So there's that, it's always a double-edged sword.
Well, and you spoke about something really interesting that people don't realize who say those things, and that is there's a pressure when you are the child of somebody like your father, and if you don't hit upon that level that parent does, then you're looked down upon. Everybody wants to talk about how somebody got something because of somebody's last name, but how about the stress that somebody feels as the kid thinking they've got to live up to that?
Yeah.
Nobody talks about that. And the idea for you, Hally, is that sure, a door was open, but if you weren't good, that door is not going to always be open. And that's what people have to realize. Like, you've got the talent, you've got the charisma, and all of that. That's where you're self-made. The sustainability of what you're doing and the growth is because of you and you alone. And I think about you telling that story about your dad coaching Nick Faldo and you're 6 years old. How much is different in the way in which you noticed when you were 6, how he would approach a conversation with Nick Faldo on the range compared to when he would teach you, and the similarities that could be there as well?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, it's pretty funny. There's some old pictures of my dad and some of the players that he has taught over the years, and he's sitting there with like a massive video camera, so we can just start there. Now he's out there with the iPad,
Yeah.
So that's always really interesting to look at just how technology has come so far in golf instruction. But yeah, I think for me, like, he obviously wants Nick Faldo to play well, but I'm his kid. So I think so for me, that's kind of going back to like the golf instruction aspect of like him as an instructor, what he can do and provide to his kids is like very good golf instruction. So that's kind of his way of showing love, is like, let's go get a lesson and let's do this and let's do that. So I think maybe it was a little bit different in that, like, he always wanted to be out on the golf course with us, whereas he sees Nick Faldo every couple weeks or every couple months, whereas for us, it's like not like it's every day or anything like that, but it's just done with a little bit more love and emotion. But I do want to say, not like negative emotion. He was and my mom, both like really, really incredible golf parents. Like regardless of how we played, we always were there. They never once walked off the golf course. They always were there with like hugs and comfort if we had a bad round, or, and be excited for us if we played well. So there was just like a slightly different way that I feel like he taught me and my brothers than the rest of the world, just because, yeah, we are his kids.
So you talked about like that's his love language is being able to
That is
give that to
100%
you.
his love
So then
language.
what are your love languages in the way you're able to show that back to the people who matter most to you?
Yeah, it's funny. I am a really big gift giver, for better or for worse. And my mom is like that as well. We are very big gift givers. But like very thoughtful gifts. So, with my boyfriend, he works in the music industry, which is such a different world than what my day to day. So that's actually really, really nice. But he'll come with me to golf tournaments. I'll go with him to music festivals and concerts. So for his birthday, I created a collage of every single like concert wristband.
Wow.
I kept them all for the whole year that we dated, which is kind of psycho looking back on it, but I'm glad that I did, because it turned out to be a really great collage. But no, I'd say it's similar to both my parents, very like thoughtful, and my dad's gift and love language just happens to be golf instruction. But it's really amazing, I'm talking about my dad and just how much he loves what he does. I always say that if this is just like the end goal, right? Again, not everyone is super lucky, is as fortunate enough to actually make a living doing what they love. Some people just have to make ends meet. So I totally see that. But I do think that the goal for anybody should be to find something that they love to do, whether it's career or just a hobby or something. Find something that you love to do, as much as my dad loves to teach golf.
Aww.
Because that guy will literally be teaching golf from his deathbed. He loves it so much. Even when we're on the range, like when he came out for my birthday to give me a lesson, I got a lesson, but he gave 3 other random people lessons.
Oh, wow.
Just because he loves it so much. And he just like, this is how I can help. This is how, like, he knows he's going to make this person's day, month, year, whatever, just by giving him a little tip and getting the guy to hit like a nice butter cut now when he was shanking it before. So I think it's just really, really cool it's really fun for me to watch him like walk into a driving range and then just give someone a tip and watch their demeanor change. Just go from being so frustrated, now all of a sudden they can make contact and hit it really well. And it's just really cool to see how satisfying that is for my dad. And then also those people just seem so happy. So I think it's really, really cool to see that relationship between him with people that he knows and random strangers. And it's just really cool. So I always hope that I could find, and I think I am finding something that I love that much. But I would say if somebody can find something that they love that much, that would be the end goal.
My guest is Hally Leadbetter. I'm Bryan Fenley. So obviously he helps people on the range, perhaps has helped you with your putting as well. Here's my next question for you, Hally. The way in which you read putts, how is that similar to your read on the dating world?
Ooh, that's a really great question. The way that I read putts, well, I'm a big, there's different ways to read putts. You can feel it out. You can also, there's like an aim point thing, which I won't really get into that too far, but basically that's like feeling it with your feet. And then depending on what degree that you have to train to do this, the degree that you feel in your feet, it corresponds to how many fingers that you put up next to the hole. And that would be the amount of break that you would play. So I think for me, I'm a very analytical person, and I really did enjoy that process of when I was learning how to putt. Sometimes I can be over analytical though, so for just understanding that process, that was enough for me. I don't need to do that on every single putt, but to know that, oh, I can read a putt with my feet and there's a fall line. So if I know that person, the person who's putting on the right side of me, if their ball is breaking to the right and we're below the hole, then my ball is also going to break to the right and probably a little bit more than their ball. So I think for me, how that kind of like relates to dating is that I am I can overthink things, but two, you just have to I guess, know when something is right or wrong. And you got to go with your gut ultimately. So like for me with my boyfriend now, like it just feels right. It
Yes.
feels like it's a really good fit. And so, yeah, I would say that for me is like not overthinking it. And then also just knowing that like, if this is the right line and then really like committing to it.
I love how you broke that down. And what feels right as well is the podcast that you have now with Michelle Wie, Golf Mostly. And you bring on excellent guests and you go beyond their professions, which is what I love. What is your tactic, Hally, for getting your guests to be so comfortable where they're sharing with you stories that, as big as the persona and that brand is of the guests that are on, people don't know about, but you're able to find those things and extract those and make your podcast conversation that much more intriguing and interesting?
Yeah, podcasting is so interesting. I feel like, I did one for Golf Digest and I really enjoyed it. I think where this one is a little bit different, and it's all really kudos to Michelle, is we are, and or I am at least, really relying on a lot of these relationships that she has fostered. Because listen, I'm not going to be able to call up Venus Williams and get her on a podcast, but Michelle is. So I think that one, it really helps to have like a bit of familiarity with the guest and also set that tone from the beginning that this is a pretty informal interview. And also, I am not afraid of telling a guest, like, listen, if you say something and you're honest about it, and you decide in 48 hours that that was not what you wanted to share, that is okay. Because I think the worst feeling is for someone to be made to feel comfortable. And then listen, there's sometimes that you have a conversation with somebody and then you're like, oh shoot, I'm not ready to tell the world that. And that's totally fine. So I think for me, I really like to tell our guests, or really anybody that I'm interviewing. And I feel like that's probably honestly not a great, most journalists probably would not agree with that. They would say, hey, this is on the record. You said it's on the record, but that's not really the business that I'm in. We want people to feel comfortable. And also we want people to be proud of what we're doing
Yes.
and want to share it and get the word out. So for me, I think it's setting that expectation at the beginning that like, hey, this is a safe space. Say whatever you want. In a couple days you decide that you don't want XYZ to be shared, like no worries, we'll take it out and we'll cut around it. So I think one, it's the relationship, and if that relationship is not there, also just spending a few minutes at the beginning of the interview getting to know the person and
Yes.
having a chat, kind of like we did, like
Yes.
just getting comfortable with the person, and just, yeah, again, like setting that tone and expectation for like a trusting symbiotic conversation.
You couldn't have said it better, because ultimately it's about that relationship preservation. That's the business you are in, and you want them to share it. You want them to be comfortable. You want others to come on. You want them to be themselves when they come on, but you also want to show them that you have their back. And that's
Yeah.
what I hope to, convey in this conversation with you and what you do with Michelle. How far back does your relationship with Michelle go?
Pretty far. Michelle has been working with my dad since she was about 12 or 13 years old.
Wow.
I would have been around 10. And it's a pretty funny relationship if you look back at photos of us, because there actually is a photo of us when we first met. She actually came to our Thanksgiving and I'm standing about a foot away from her. And I still remember I was so scared and so intimidated and just so in awe of her, and still am, but all three of those things. But she has become, you know, she was a friend, and then she became almost like a sister to me. I don't have any sisters, and Michelle's an only child, so Michelle's really the closest thing that I have to a sister. So it goes from us being 10 and 13 to Michelle taking me to my first nightclub in Miami when I turned 21,
Wow.
and me leaving my ID at home and her having to slip the bouncer money to let me in. And it was ironic because it was my 21st birthday. But we go really far back, and our relationship definitely has its ebbs and flows. I've gotten mad at her, she's gotten mad at me. We've worked through things, and yeah, just like sisters. So it's really, really cool to be able to do this podcast with her. And also it's been really neat to be um nearby throughout her life, and watching her evolve and grow as a person in the media landscape. I mean, there were times, I'd watch her do interviews in front of, a bunch of reporters, and she doesn't, and she'd admit this as well, doesn't really share too much. She's pretty, at least up when she was playing professional golf, was pretty kept to herself, a lot of things. But now she's got a wonderful husband and a beautiful baby, and I think she feels really good about where she's at in life, and is a little bit more comfortable in sharing some of her thoughts on things, which is really cool. And I feel really, really lucky, because just as much as this podcast is about interviewing guests, for me, it's also about people getting to know Michelle, because they haven't really had that opportunity to do so throughout her career. And she's such a really, really cool, dynamic person with a lot of really interesting opinions on things. So it's really special for me to, I guess, have the honor of being her co-host and sort of coaxing out some of these answers of things that I didn't even know in the past about her.
That's what I love about that conversation platform that you guys have. And having, I'm sure, many times together on the golf course, you too. If I were to play around with you, Hally, what am I going to learn about you, about what you're all about, that I wouldn't learn anywhere else if I saw you any other place?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would say, well, for one, you could tell if I was nervous, because I swing really quickly when I'm nervous, which is funny because that also what happens when I get nervous on camera. I talk really quickly. So that's been really funny for me, noticing as I, do more and more hosting gigs, is I'm like, oh, there I go. Like, the same bodily sensations that I feel when I get nervous on a golf course is the same bodily sensations that I feel. So I'm like, it's cool. That's what's so cool about golf, is you can really get to know yourself well. But I think probably that I am a little competitive. And that's what everybody says about themselves, right? They're competitive. But I really do love the strategy behind golf. Like, sure, I like the golf swing instruction. It's more my brother's thing. But for me, I love really plotting my way around the golf course and being like, okay, so it's 240 to that bunker. So I'm going to hit my 5 wood, because it's not going to get there, and that's going to lay me up to 70 yards. Now the pin is in the back. You cannot go over, because there's a bunker out of bounds or whatever over the back. So I'm going to take club that no chance whatsoever I can hit as hard as I can, and I'm only going to be able to reach the pin. And then I'm going to make sure that I have an uphill putt. Like, all that kind of stuff to me is really, really fascinating. And I think kind of helps me in my day-to-day life too, because I'm a very big strategizer, kind of when I talked about in the putting thing. So yeah, I think that's what you'd probably realize about me, is like, I don't just grip it and rip it. I really try to think my way around a golf course, especially now that I don't get that much time to practice. Strategy is even more important.
Well, you're thinking multiple steps ahead, and that has proved to be so beneficial to you in your career. And just to say that I'm honored to have you on, and to you to share that openness with me in our conversation. I'm floored. I'm thrilled. And as we wrap up this conversation, Hally Leadbetter, she calls herself in one word a hoot. And I hope that people realize that in that conversation that we just had, that she is. And she is just an up and coming golf media maestro, if she isn't already. Hally, thank you so much. I'm Bryan Fenley, and getting to meet you and doing a little golf as well, and other sports. But this story that you told, and the depth of which you taught it, was really meaningful to me, and very impactful, I know, for others as well.
Thank you, Bryan. Thanks for having me.